federal deal that's ever been struck. I mean, when you're doing these kind of things, you have to keep on moving forward.
Circumstances change.
Just because it's
change.
This is not
Andy,
what has happened in the past. We have a strong history
quick
here.
while you're behind.
We have a strong history in this country of striking state-federal deals and then moving forward. That's certainly what's happened. And is anyone really arguing Parramatta Repping is a bad project?
Labor attitude is bugger the voters.
You've known for some time that O'Farrell had this plan, that he's campaigned vigorously on this, saying this is what Sydney needs, and that the other was a political fix to win Bennelong. And yet you're saying that this is locked in stone. Mr Albanese says, no, we're not going to relook at it. Surely the events of Saturday should lead to a reconsidering of it. It's a lot of money.
Well, Parramatta Repping is an important project here, and I grew up in Pennant Hills, which is not far from there, and I know how much residents of Sydney would benefit from having that link. John Alexander, Liberal candidate for Bennelong, has campaigned for Parramatta to Epping. This is an important project which will help reduce traffic congestion in Sydney. It should be done, and we're asking Mr O'Farrell to go ahead with it.
Okay, let's look at another issue.
Kieran, just before we move off that.
Sure.
Kieran, just before we move off that, Andy's saying, oh no, we can't possibly change the decisions that were made on infrastructure because they've already been established. No, we can't possibly change those. But the government has absolutely no hesitation in changing its mind on a carbon tax. Before the election, they said no carbon tax, and then, without a mandate, they decided we will have a carbon tax. Yet they're going to do the exact opposite and ignore the mandate of Barry O'Farrell.
I'm happy to discuss your party's plans to subsidise big polluters and ours to reduce pollution in the economy by taxing big polluters. Okay. You want to have that debate? Very happy.
Let's just move on, Senator Fifield. I want to ask you about the fact that Barry O'Farrell. Well, this is an issue to do with Tony Abbott, the fact that Tony Abbott wasn't really much of a role in that campaign. Are there any tensions there at all, particularly off the back of the comments last year where Tony Abbott said to your party room, we're not going to win the election adopting a Barry O'Farrell small target strategy? It didn't go down well with Mr O'Farrell, did it?
Well, there's no tension. Tony helped launch the campaign with Barry. Barry is going to be a sensational premier, and no one was more delighted about his election than Tony. So tensions, absolutely not.
These tensions go back a long way, Kieran, as we know. Mr O'Farrell beat Mr Abbott for State Director of the Liberal Party in the early 1990s. They represent fundamentally two different wings of the party. Mr O'Farrell from an accommodating, more moderate wing, Mr Abbott from a very extreme wing of the party. We saw that with the sorts of groups he was associating with last week. League of Nations, Citizens Electoral Council, Pauline Hanson, One Nation. That's the brand of politics Mr Abbott has brought to the federal parliament.
Well, let me set the record straight. My current boss is Tony Abbott. My first boss in politics was Barry O'Farrell. He was Chief of Staff in the Transport Minister's office in the Griner government when I worked there. And I can tell you, there is no tension between the two of them. They get on extremely well. And this is going to be a fantastic government in New South Wales.
Andrew Lee, you have a bit of history there as well. Didn't you take on Barry O'Farrell in the early days somewhere?
Indeed, I feel like my response to this mirrors Mitch's in some sense. My first political opponent was Barry O'Farrell, and I'm now in a Labor government which is opposed by Mr Abbott. But these are fundamentally different people. They bring a different style to their politics. I think part of that is why Mr O'Farrell did quite well over the weekend. That he was seen as being somebody who didn't bring extremism into Australian politics.
Would you urge your front bench colleagues within the Labor Party to sit down and be as accommodating as possible to the new government? It would look a bit odd if you were belligerent in the face of that overwhelming mandate that he's got.
Well, look, certainly we're congratulating Mr O'Farrell for his victory, and we'll be looking to work with him as we've worked with premiers from Victoria and Western Australia. I mean, I think, Kieran, after these sorts of election results, there's a tendency to say, well, things have fallen apart, state-federal relations can never work again. But we saw Colin Barnett, Premier of Western Australia, saying after the COAG health deal recently that it was efficient, effective, and it was going to work well. I expect to see the same sort of comments out of Mr O'Farrell.
Anna Bligh called it the Labor disease in New South Wales. Now, a disease can spread, and we saw Kevin Rudd, of course, toppled in the first term of the Labor government. Do you feel comfortable now that that disease has been at least inoculated in the federal parliament, or is there still work to be done in terms of federal Labor?
Look, there's always work to be done in improving our political party. I think the moment that we sit still and we say that our party is perfect is the moment that we should go and find another career.
What are the key problems then right now that need to be dealt with?
Well, there's been a national review report which has been done, which has noted that, like all other political parties, we've been shedding members over time. We need to get more people into the Labor Party. There's certain ways of doing that, perhaps by bringing more internal party democracy, creating more policy forums. I think we should be constantly looking at how to reinvent the Labor Party to make it more up to date with changing technologies, more use of social media, more use of campaigning. Some of those techniques the Obama campaign used, for example.
And not assassinating your own leaders.
Look, I think the infighting in New South Wales is clearly a major factor in terms of
the federal government. Your own government toppled the leader as well.
Look, there has been plenty of leadership changes on both sides in federal politics over time. But I think the important thing is to recognise that when we start focusing on ourselves rather than focusing on problems like climate change, like a stronger economy, a fairer society, that's the moment we're in trouble. We do need to do party reform, but party reform is not our number one focus. Our number one focus is providing opportunities to every Australian kid, regardless of where they grew up.
Mitch Fifield, Conservative government's now in charge of 70% of the nation's economy at the state level. Would you expect them to be to consult with Tony Abbott to ensure that the politics are right, as well as what Andrew describes as the cooperation within COAG?
Well, state governments, be they Liberal or Labor, are sovereign entities, and it's their job to look after the best interests of the citizens in their state, and I'm sure that's what Barry and Ted and Colin are doing and will continue to do. Obviously, as members of the same political party, we cooperate, but first and foremost, they're there to do the business of the people of New South Wales, and that's where Labor lost their way in New South Wales. They forgot that what people want are basically trains that run on time. They don't want queues to be too long in hospitals, and they want decent infrastructure so they can get around the city. That's what Labor lost sight of. They also lost sight of cost of living pressures, which is the same problem that Julia Gillard has. She's lost sight of the cost of living pressures.
Okay. Gentlemen,
and Andy was, I think, in a little bit of a parallel universe, saying that part of the solution is Labor having more social media and better techniques. This isn't about those sorts of issues. This is about delivering results for people.
Okay, Senator Fifield, 20 seconds or less. What are the implications here for the independents, in your view?
Well, I think the first point is that even in those seats held by independents, there was a massive message for Labor. There was a Labor primary vote of 6 or 7% offered in those seats. There is a message here, and I think we partly had that delivered from your first guest this morning, Joel Fitzgibbon, who said that what people are looking for is stable majority government. That really was a concession by Joel Fitzgibbon that people don't have that under Julia Gillard. Okay, Senator Fifield and Andrew Lee, appreciate your time, gents.
Thanks, Kieran.
That's all for this edition of AIM Agenda. Ashley Gillam will be along at 1:30 for Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Kieran Gilbert. Thanks for your company.